How's it going, guys? As promised here, I am going to be doing a Disc Priest guide. And full disclosure, I'm not going to claim myself as best Disc Priest. I've been 2,700 Shuffle, I've been 2,600 threes. It's not crazy impressive to me, but I'm just hoping to be able to help out some people who are either newer to the class or, lower rated than me that are just looking to learn. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started here. This is going to be the outline of what I would like to talk about with Disc Priest, and I hope this covers everything. I want to do like a disc ranking compared to other healers and pros and cons. Disc Priests are actually really powerful right now. When they got the second charge of pain suppression, it just kind of feels like they have really good damage reduction value as well as doing damage, so they could just kind of like, they could just shove their CDs and do a bunch of damage and kind of close games out. So their ranking, I would personally, it's really hard to say, man. I would like to say they're a top 3 healer. I think it depends on who you ask or maybe what comp, on where people put them on that ranking. Some people might have them first. I would probably say they're second or third, maybe depending. I think Evoker, Ardruid, and Disc are probably the top healers right now. And it's really hard to place each one in a specific order. It's really hard to do. I think every healer kind of has their own weaknesses, including Disc Priest, and it might just be comp dependent or matchup dependent on which one is the best and which one is the, I guess the worst of the best. So yeah, and the pros and cons, like I said, Disc is really good with damage reduction. You have 2 charges of pain suppression. You could play the Dome of Light, the Big Barrier, which is another 50% damage reduction, and Disc Priest just pushes the pace of the game. So you literally have Bloodlust with Power Infusion. Power Infusion is one of the best offensive cooldowns in the game. Shadow Priests are really powerful for it, but when you have it on a healer, it brings a whole nother dynamic. This cooldown is just ridiculous. And then on top of that, you have a ton of damage. An absolute ton. Like, I'm talking like, if you were able to DPS full time and not heal, you could literally go into a game as a Disc Priest and just be like a full damage dealer, like if you had a healer to back you up, and you would be able to like actually keep up. It's kind of crazy. But you do have to heal, so obviously you can't use all your globals as DPS globals. So you have a ton of damage, and you have Purge. I think there's only 2 healers with Purge if you're not counting Evoker. Evoker doesn't have like a consistent Purge. So you have Massive Spell, which is great for removing, Bops, Bubble, Ice Blocks, and also you can get out Cyclone. You can get off Cyclone. It's not a huge deal, but you have the offensive Purge, which is great. You have the damage, which is great. You have the Power Infusion, which is great. And, obviously Fear is still pretty strong CC, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's like crazy because, sometimes you're just kind of sitting back, just pumping them. So you're a pretty powerful healer as Disc, which is not how it started at the beginning of the expansion. In terms of race, I really don't think it matters that much. I think it could be personal preference. I think if I was in a tournament setting fighting Assassination Rogues, I would probably play Dwarf or Dark Iron Dwarf. But with that being said, I don't really think Disc is a target that people like to train down. I think it's like a fairly tanky target. I mean, you could play Angelic Bulwark if you want. You have the spam Desperate Prayer talent if you want. The Desperate Prayer heals for more. You have a really easy time just pain suppressing yourself in stuns. You have like a ton of uptime on Focus Will. So I don't really think you need that. Personally, if you want to play a race just based on the fact that you want to look cool, you can play any race you want. If you want to be undead, that's fine. If you want to be Night Elf, that's fine. If you want to be human, that's fine. I don't think human's really good in terms of Disc Priest. I really do think you could play what you want. I think Shadow Meld is pretty nice just for being able to stop damage or stop CC with that, on-demand kind of get-out-of-jail-free card. Someone in the chat said Gnome. I think Gnome is actually not bad based on the fact that I believe your Solace gives you back maximum mana, and your Shadow Fiend also gives you back maximum mana, which means the extra intellect you get from Gnome actually factors into that. So I think you have 284,000 mana as a Gnome, so you get like a little bit extra from the Solace and the Mindbender, which isn't bad. And you also get the Escape Artist, which means you can get out of Root Beams, and also kind of helps you get away from melee every now and then. I personally prefer Night Elf. Tournament setting, I'd probably play Dwarf, but you could choose anything. It really doesn't matter. But if I had to pick a best race, I would probably say Shadow Meld has the biggest upswing. I always go over add-ons whenever I start these guides, just so people can see what I use. I started using big debuffs. This is one of the newer ones. It shows like a increased size debuff on your party frame. So if someone's in a stun, if someone's in a polymorph, someone's in some sort of CC, it highlights that CC so you are able to easier recognize, like, oh, he's in a stun, I should use a cooldown here. Oh, he's in a polymorph, I could spell that here. Things like that. This add-on does not work with the extra debuff script that I use, so that is one thing that you will have to keep in mind. You basically have to stop using the extra debuff script. I personally always chose to see extra debuffs over the big debuffs because I thought that was more important, but in this expansion, it feels like there's so many ridiculous amounts of debuffs, assassination rogues, unholy decays, you know, Demon Warlock, Shadow Priest, all that stuff. I wasn't seeing the important stuff. You know, I could literally fight against assassination rogue, and I couldn't even tell my partner was in a kidney shot because there was so many like debuffs. I didn't see it. So big debuffs was really important for that for me. Details is what I use to kind of like see what's going on over here in terms of damage, healing, all that good stuff. My slot is just an action bar saver add-on. Nameplate buffs is the add-on I've used to replace flyplate buffs to see, like, you know, everything over nameplates. Omnibar is my interrupt tracker. Omni CD is what shows my friendly players' cooldowns. S Arena updated is the S Arena that you can move around, shows the DR trackers. Yeah, Trophy GCD is an add-on that I use for you guys so you can see my globals. Weak Rs are obviously very, very important. We'll go over some of the weak Rs I use. I don't think I actually have any disc-specific ones. I want to get one that tracks harsh disciplines, and I think that might be the only one I really have for disc. And Party Pet Fix is what allows you to see the pet frames on the regular frames. Yeah, I don't think I have any weak Rs for disc now that I mention it. The only thing I would say is that I do have the standard Dragonflight weak R package that just kind of shows whenever anyone's using a very strong ability, just go into my stream, type in exclamation WA, and it is the enemy weak R package. Basically, this just allows you to easily recognize when someone is going to take a lot of damage. So yeah, I think this is obviously really important. It gives you an easier time to know when you should be using barrier and pain sup and things like that. Macros. I don't think I have anything really crazy in terms of macros. I have a void shift I have a void shift 1-2. That way, you know, if I'm like damaging enemy and someone takes a spike of damage, I can just void shift them without having to target them. Dispel party 1-2-3. This is an @player angelic feather. I hope that you guys know about this macro, but if you don't, this macro literally just places the feather on your feet. I know some people did not know you could do that, and they're constantly placing the feather at your feet. That is a little old school. This is definitely an easier way to do it. Focus Purge. It's just a simple Desperate Prayer macro. Focus Mind Control. I have a lot of Help Harm macros. This one is not for disc personally, but just in case you guys do like Help Harm macros, this is a way to write one. You'll see more of those. Mind Control Arena 3, Dispel Party 1, Dispel Player. This makes your Purge and your Dispel a one-button press. If I target a enemy, I'll press Purge. If I target a friendly, I'll press Dispel Magic. I have macros for Dispel Party 1-2-3, so this is more for like Battlegrounds and things like that. I have a Grip 1-2 here. Makes it really easy to like grip smoke bombs and stuff if you're not targeting on the right person. Mind Control Arena 1, Mind Control Arena 2, Cast Power Infusion. I have a macro to actually, this is just a regular Cast Power Infusion. I use this for Soul Shuffle because I don't have like a 1-2, I guess, for Power Infusion, like Party 1-2. Normally when I just like play with Mez, it's just, I always cast them in Mez and things like that. So this is more like for Soul Shuffle, just have a Cast Power Infusion, but I don't know why I'm showing Power Shield. Not a huge deal. Party 1, Void Shift. This macro right here is how you fix the Inner Light, Inner Shadow bug. So when you use Inner Light and you go Inner Shadow, you can never swap back to Inner Light with the regular ability. It's bugged. This macro allows you to be able to swap back, which is obviously very nice. I will just go ahead and show you the Inner Light, Inner Shadow weak aura in case you want to copy this. I think that's like the only one I have for disc, and eventually I'll get the harsh discipline ones, and you're always more than welcome to stop by in my stream and get that. Mind Control Arena 3. This is a target of target powered Solace. These macros are really nice, at least to me, because it just kind of allows you to use your damage dealing abilities while you are targeting a friendly player, which makes it super easy to like get your harsh disciplines up. I have the same thing for Mind Blast. Player self penance here. Target to target smite there. Once again, really easy. Cursor for barrier, so you don't have to click. You just press it on your mouse. I have a target player power word fortitude because if someone's out of line of sight or someone is, you know, I guess it's mainly out of sight, you always target yourself with the power word 4 and it will always go on your other player. Pretty min-max there. It's not really that important. Power infusion, specific players. This is my death macro. This death's the closest enemy. And I will say, sometimes this death macro does fail. You know, sometimes someone could be, you know, maybe behind you or something, and you're trying to death, and I'm pretty sure death is like a positional thing. You need to be facing them. So sometimes like it'll target someone like kind of behind you and then you don't get the death off. Sometimes it targets a totem and you kill the totem and you don't take the death damage. Sometimes it can maybe target someone out of line of sight. So this does fail. This macro does fail. I have noticed situations where it does fail. I know some priests decide to use a focus macro for death and you just try and focus the person that's CCing you. I feel like, for example, if I'm fighting against multiple people that are CCing me, like mage lock or something, like I can't always be focusing on the person that's CCing me. Sometimes I'll focus the mage, the lock will cast a fear, vice versa. Maybe Hex is coming in from somewhere. I don't know. I feel like even though this does have some inconsistencies, it does generally work pretty well. I guess if you were trying to super omega tryhard it, you could also have a focus death macro. I personally don't, but just letting you know. This is also another, I don't know why I have 2 of these macros, but yeah, cast Angelic Feather. This is a help harm for renew Shadow Word Pain. I like this macro. Targeted friendly, it is renew. Targeted enemy, it is Shadow Word Pain. The help harm macros basically just save key binds and allow you to have like maybe like less awkward like damage dealing binds. Kind of like more like main-ish binds or comfortable binds. Target smite, I think I already showed that. Target mind blast. Like I said, these are really just nice for getting like those harsh disciplines up. Like you're targeting a friendly and you just want to boom mind blast, get the you know, the proc and then send out a penance. It's obviously really nice. And I think that is it for all my macros. Stat Prio and Enchants. So from what I understand, you want haste as discipline. My gear is far from perfect, but when you play 4 pieces discipline, and I think 4 pieces is pretty good, you probably want to gem like the verse haste gems and probably want to enchant verse as well. Just because your verse will be a little bit low. I don't think your tier gear has a lot of versatility on it. And versatility is actually really good for disc because the more damage you do, the more healing you do, and you know, vice versa or whatever. But it's pretty nice. So yeah, I think haste verse is definitely the way to go. I have been experimenting a little bit with like throwing on a couple pieces of mastery gear because I've been playing like a full healing build. But yeah, it's generally speaking haste verse. In terms of enchants, obviously you should have the 5% mana and the reserve of intellect, and the weapon enchant. I do like the intellect. I don't think you need the haste. Some people use the leech enchants. I personally use the speed. I don't really think it matters, but I do think that if you're trying to get fears or you're trying to get away from people and they have the speed enchants and you don't, I don't think that you're going to catch them. So that's kind of why I go that. Stamina on legs, and like I already said, verse enchants on that. So I think that covers all the enchants. So the water that you get is from the auction house. It's like craftable water. I don't really understand how it works, who makes it, but I just buy it from the auction house. Delicious Dragon Spittle. It is better than the water that you get from the vendor. Vendor water, 225k. Delicious Dragon Spittle, 257k. So you definitely want to make sure that you pick that up. You cannot drink water in solo shuffle. A lot of people come in and they're like, bro, why can't I drink in arena? You're drinking in arena, why can't I? The only time you could drink water in arena is if a mage makes it for you in terms of solo shuffle, but yeah, you cannot queue, or you cannot drink water in solo shuffle. For crafted gear, obviously you want the CC reduction piece. It is the best piece you can have. The micro CCs in this game are ridiculous. And then I do think that the leg wraps are very good for the priest. It procs haste, and it's super good because it's already a verse haste piece. So definitely another piece that you want to get from crafting. It's just, yeah, it's going to be 424, really, really easy to get. Spec and honor talents, man, this is a crazy one because I feel like disc. I feel like everyone has a different like iteration of how you can play disc or how you should play disc or how they like to play disc. And I feel like a lot of it really comes down to how you're comfortable with playing it, or maybe the comp you're playing, or what your personal preference is. But I really feel like disc can be played multiple different ways. And it really can just kind of match the comp that you're playing, the play style that you like, or just who you are as a player. And it's honestly really cool. This is currently the spec that I have played the most as Discipline. And I would say this is the most off the wall spec. And why I say that is because the first thing people say when they tune into my stream is, isn't Palm bad for disc? Like, isn't that just an awful global? You're not playing Expiation? Like, isn't that all your burst? And you're right. Prayer Mending is generally not taking as Disc Priest. I would say it averages about 10% of my healing per game. And Expiation is a lot of damage. Now, what I've been finding personally with the comps that I have been playing, as well as even in Solo Shuffle, is that I feel like I cannot get damage out the way I want to for those specs to be working properly. In Solo Shuffle, from my experience recently, and it might be because I'm a little lower rated, and as I get higher rated, I'm finding more consistency with the way my teammates don't line of sight me, don't push in, they use their defensives, and it allows me to use more damage. But right now, I'm in this weird situation where I want to do damage. The enemy team's playing behind a pillar. My DPS run in behind a pillar, start dying, and I'm in an unrecoverable situation. Oh, and then also with like the expiation stuff, people are just line of sighting me. I just can't. I can't cast Mind Blast the way I want to. The comp that I've been playing mostly on disc, and you guys are probably gonna hate me for saying this, is I've been playing Brewmaster on Holy Decay Disc Priest, and basically what that is, it's a melee cleave. Every single interrupt is going on to me. Sometimes teams train me, and I just can't get that damage out. So Palm feels really good because it's just free healing. Playing all these healing talents feel great because it just helps me, get healing out, and it doesn't really feel like the comp is relying on my damage. So there's obviously, we'll talk more about this tree in a second, but in terms of this tree, there's so many different things you could do, okay? Sometimes I'm not spec'd into Mass Dispel, and people come to my stream, they're like, bro, you're not spec'd into Mass Dispel? You literally only need Mass Dispel into 3 classes: Paladins, Mages, and Druids. And it's arguable, it's debatable if you even want it into Druids, because a lot of Druids don't even go for clones. I would say Boomkins get the most clones, but you don't always need Mass Dispel. So, the question is, are you getting trained? Do you want to get away more with improved Fade? Do you think you could be swapped to 100-0? Do you want to play Angelic Bulwark? Do you want more Shadow Word Pain damage? Do you want to try and get full Death Throws? Throws of Pain, especially if you're playing Expiation. The more Shadow Word Pain damage, the more you get from Expiation. That's why you should probably get Pain and Suffering if you're there. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Do you want to play the improved Mass Dispel? Are you fighting against a warrior? Maybe you want to get Inspiration to try and reduce some of their damage. One talent I'll talk about a little bit here because this is a little bit different, and I will give credit to Meh for telling me about this. Binding Heal actually puts Atonement on yourself, and that is a fantastic way to save globals and save mana. I've been playing Binding Heals unless I'm getting trained. When you get those Surge of Light procs and you use them on other people, it immediately puts the Atonement up on yourself, which is, it's amazing, honestly. It feels so good. Just saves mana, saves globals. Disc Priests are super global capped, so I think this is really nice. But yeah, there's a ton of different iterations you could play with this build. These talents get changed almost every single game, basically. It really depends on what you play with. So obviously, I like Focus Mending and Prayer Mending. I don't change these two. But if you weren't playing Prayer Mending, and I'm not telling you that you should or you have to, but what I am saying is, if you feel like you're struggling to get damage out, and you feel like you're falling behind on healing, and that's one thing I kind of didn't talk about in the pros and cons. Disc does fall behind on healing. Sorry, I didn't mention that earlier. And you feel like you're in this situation, go ahead and try this build, because I actually think this build is fantastic for healing. Obviously, with the these micro changes here, there's just a couple free points. This is a free point. This is a free point. This is a free point. And you can throw that around basically wherever you want. So let's go ahead and talk about this build over here. So I would say that a more standard build for Disc Priest is this build right here. Basically, you take the Expiation, you take the Twilight Equilibrium, and you drop Blaze and Wheel and Woe. I call it Well and Woe, but whatever. You pick up the Schism, you pick up the Shadow Cove. Well, you're kind of already Shadow Cove. This point is arguable, like if you want more Shadow Word Pain damage or more Atonement Healing. Honestly, I'm not really 100% sure which one is better. You can kind of make that decision, I guess, but yeah. So I would say this is a more standard build, which gives you damage. Twilight Equilibrium, we could talk about how to maximize that a little bit. Let me see where we're at here. We could talk about that in like the healing damage rotation a little bit, but basically you don't have. I think I was trying to min-max this a little bit too hard, where I would cast a Mind Blast, cast a Smite, cast a Mind Blast, cast a Smite, and I do think that is fairly good to do if you can do it. But guess what? Sometimes when I was casting those Smites, people would lock me out, and I'd be like, oh crap, I just got locked on my healing tree. That is really not good. So I think I was trying to maybe min-max that a little bit too hard. So I do think that you should be careful of that and maybe try and weave in the holy spells as like your Shadow Word Pain, well, your Purge the Wicked, that's a holy spell, and your Solace, things of that nature. This is the more standard disc build if that's what you're looking for. And then if you really, really, really just want to pump some dam, you could do this, where you play this and then you change this. And basically your Aegis of Wrath is gone. You've picked up Smite, Penance, and Powered Solace damage. And this build is really crazy in terms of damage. This is very fun. But I would say the biggest takeaway with this build is when you're getting trained and you can't get penances out and you feel like you're falling behind, and especially on your Rapture, your Power Word shields feel significantly weaker. Significantly weaker. So I feel like this right here is kind of a little bit better overall. And yeah, there's also builds with no Radiance, depending on what, how you want to play this. We'll go to the damage build with no Radiance. You would probably just take these 2 points from Radiance and put them in like Shadow Word Pain, and then put it into Duration of Schism or something, and then, go from there. So you have these 2 points right here. Schism, Duration, Shadow Word Pain. I personally feel like Radiance, like when you're trying to spam all this damage, Radiance is a really good way to get atonements up quickly. 3 atonements very fast, as well as do healing, which allows you to get back into spamming that damage. I don't really think you should try and play without Radiance. I don't think it is super taxing as an honor talent, and I would say 99 out of 100 games you're not losing on disc because you run out of mana anymore. That is not the issue. You run out of healing on disc, not mana. Ultimate Radiance, we talked about Radiance. As long as you're spec'd into Radiance, you're always playing Ultimate Radiance. These are the general talents that I run, but because I play the Palm Spec. If you're not playing Palm Spec and you're playing Damage Spec, these are going to be the general talents that you run. If you decide that you don't want Dome of Light and you want more damage, you could play Eternal Rest, a Shadow Word Death on cooldown and get more expiation damage. If you are playing against a heavy physical team, you could play Strength of Soul. If you are playing against like mages or something, you could take Thought Steal. But basically, if you're playing the damage build, you're always playing Inner Shadow. If you're spec'd into Radiance, you're always playing Inner Radiance. If you're getting trained, you could get weird and play Catharsis. But yeah, honestly, like Dome of Light, I think it's really good, but in solo shuffle, people are allergic to standing in Dome of Light, so it feels really awkward. If you're playing a setup comp, you could play Dark Archangel, and it can absolutely do a ton of damage. I was playing against like a jungle the other day who was playing Dark Arc and literally was just doing the most ridiculous damage to me in the opener. It was insane. So yeah, it's this is basically your free talent here if you're playing the damage build. If you're playing the healing build, then you're playing the Cardinal Mending, and then this is your free talent. So it really just depends. I've actually played Archangel before. It doesn't feel bad, if you feel like you're not getting Dome of Light value. Like, for example, in your Soul Shuffle, you could totally play this build. So yeah, I mean, the honor talents, I don't want to say are self-explanatory, but you don't really have too much wiggle room. You know what I mean? It feels like you're always locked into at least 2. Like, if you're Palm, you're locked into this. If you're Damage, you're locked into this. And then this is your free one. So it's kind of what it comes down to. There is a lot. So we'll start with the tier gear. When you press Power Word Shield, the effectiveness of your next direct or damage spell is increased by 10%. Press Power Word Shield, damage spell increased by 10%, healing increased by 10%. Very simple, okay? But what you got to know is that there is a lot of these little micro things, right? Like a lot of them, and they add up. So let's try and write this down maybe. Like shield equals 10% dam or healing. And then when you penance, okay? So 4 set equals Penance is bigger shields. That's either damage or healing. Okay. Now we have, let's go to my, I guess like my regular spec, because I feel like I like this. This is well and well. Well and well equals bigger shield. What else do we have here? If you play Twilight Equilibrium, Twilight equals more dam, bigger penance equals bigger shield. Schism equals bigger Shadower Pain equals bigger expiation. This is also slash bigger Shadower Pain equals bigger X Twilight Equilibrium. Shadow Cove equals bigger penance equals bigger shield. There's so many things, man. I'm trying to get it all written down so I don't miss anything, I guess. Harsh Disc equals more penance equals bigger shields. Power of Darkness, you're right. Penance proc equals bigger penance equals bigger shield. Wow. This is a lot. So these are all micro interactions that directly benefit like other spells. And it is just wild to think about how much this spec has in terms of micro interactions. Can you pay attention to all of it in game? You should be trying to actively think about some of it. But let's just start with the spec I'm playing right now. So this spec is a little bit more simple. You don't really have to worry about the Schism mechanic. You don't have to worry about the Twilight Equilibrium mechanic. You don't have to worry about the Shadow Covenant mechanic. All that you have to worry about is well and well. So yeah, with the well and woe spec, like I'm trying to say, this is very simple. You just want to try and get a big penance with a 7-stack. And the only thing that you don't want to do after you get this well and well is you don't want to solace. You don't want to solace and get that 35% damage increase. Just take the power word shield increase, if that makes sense. So very simple. Don't waste your well and woe stacks on 35% solace unless you're really trying to, like, you really think you're going to kill someone. Use it on the power shield. Otherwise, you just waste 7 stacks and you're Omega Sag. Now we'll get into the more complicated version. So I will say that this spec I'm playing right here is, you know, a lot simpler. And I do like this spec a lot because I feel like I have more healing. I have less to worry about. I would recommend you try it and shuffle if you feel like you're struggling to get damage out or you're struggling to get healing out. But let's go to, I guess, the more complicated spec. And this is where things get interesting. So the way you could do the biggest dam here, and I'm gonna try and write this down because I think it's a little bit awkward, is what I like to do is I like to Shadow Cove into Schism. And what this is gonna do is 15% more dam. And then you also get an additional 15% more damage from Twilight Equilibrium because you go Shadow into Holy. Twilight Equal, 15% more dam. So, just to show you here, you cast a Shadow spell, and then you cast a Holy spell. So now this is a 30% bigger Purge the Wicked, which means your expiations are more powerful. And then, if you're trying to Omega Tryhard, you do Mind Blast into Smite X2. But you don't really have to do Smite X2. You could do a Solace, or you could do another. You could do just one Solace. So we'll just do this. And then after that powered Solace, you have the Schism up, you have the Shadow Covenant up, and you can just blast an Omega 7-stack Penance, and that's really nice. So this is like the big burst. So let's do this in real time, okay? So Shadow Cove, Schism, Shadow Word Pain, Mind Blast, Smite, Mind Blast, Solace, and then we have the 7 stack here, and we just do the biggest penance there. That is no mega penance right there. That penance right there probably did hundreds of thousands of damage. 130k with a single penance. If you really wanted to, you could try and sneak a shield in before that and get like a little bit extra damage on your Dark Reprimand. You're more than welcome to do that for an extra 10%. But yeah, that's going to make your next shield really powerful, getting that big penance in. And yeah, just overall, I would say like that's like how you do the big burst combination. But your damage rotation, if you're playing Equilibrium, you do want to try and min-max the fact that you are doing Shadow into Holy. But just be careful about like opening up your Holy tree. And you could use Shadow or Pain to fill that Holy Void. So you could like Mind Blast Solace, and then you could Mind Blast Shadow or Pain, and then you could Death, and then like Shadow or Pain someone else. So you don't always have to Smite, but just know that Smite is kind of nice because it does get up your Harsh Discipline. So just all I'm saying is be careful getting your Holy Tree locked out. That's all I'm trying to explain there. In terms of like just a general damage rotation, always try and keep up at least a single Shadow or Pain. You want the Shadow or Pains to proc Power of the Dark Side, which increases the effectiveness of your next penance by 50%. Sorry, brain lagging. So you want to try and always keep at least one Shadow or Pain up. You want to Solace on cooldown, just to continuously get Harsh Disciplines up. And you really want to try and Mind Blast on CD. Your Shadow tree is your, like, it's your no-risk tree. If you get kicked on Shadow, you Penance, you Palm, you Radiance, you Shield, you Smite. You don't really care if you get kicked on Shadow. So whenever you feel like you're not terribly behind, you should be Mind Blasting as often as possible. Someone's in your line of sight, you're casting Mind Blast. It's Atonement Healing, you're getting Harsh Disciplines, and yeah, it doesn't matter if you get interrupted. So you always want to be casting that. So one Purge the Wicked up as often as possible. Solace on CD. Mind Blast as frequently as possible. Smite when it's safe. And yeah, if you're playing Expiation, you could also Death on cooldown for Expiation procs. That's, you know, completely fine. But yeah, that's just general damage rotation. Nothing really tricky. Obviously, you know, we talked about the burst a little bit. When should you be using Shadow Covenant? I generally like to kind of match my Shadow Covenant with my Schism. But one thing I will say is that you can also use Shadow Covenant as kick protection, which I do very frequently in my healing tree. When I play this healing tree, like, it does, people ask why I even have Shadow Covenant. So Shadow Covenant in this healing tree increases my healing of my penance by 30 or 25%. But not only that, I use it as lockout protection. I use Shadow Covenant, I cast a Shadow Penance. If I get kicked, boom. Like I was just saying, the Shadow tree is your expendable tree. Like you can get kicked on it. It's just risk-free. So that's another way you can use Shadow Covenant. But normally when I'm bursting, I save Schism for Shadow Covenant. I like duration over the damage there. And then healing rotation is very simple. A lot of people ask me about Renew. Why don't I keep Renew up on people? I only press Renew on people that already have Atonement. If I feel like I'm going to get crowd controlled, I feel like if I'm really struggling with healing, or if I'm literally just trying to reset the cooldown of Power Word Shield because I'm behind, because Renew resets the cooldown of Power Word Shield a little bit. So I generally don't Renew a lot. I don't think it's one of those buttons that is super important to press, but I do think that you should be pressing it. But yeah, I mean, Disc is literally just shielding and penancing on CD. You Radiance to fill the gaps in terms of when you need burst healing, or when you're trying to apply atonements to multiple people. And if you're playing Palm, you literally just Palm on CD. It's that simple. I don't really think there's too much else in terms of healing for Disc. I mean, obviously you have Atonement healing, but we kind of already talked about like doing damage. You should do damage whenever you can. When you're playing the damage build, it feels really awkward, and I do struggle this. Like, when should you be going for damage versus when should you be going for healing? And I think the biggest thing is just try and get the Mind Blast out when you can, man. Just try and get the Mind Blast out when you can. You just have to understand that getting the Mind Blasts out are going to help you get Harsh Disciplines, which could give you more healing. Obviously, you get the, you know, the bigger the penance is, the stronger your Force Head is. So every time you get a big penance, this increases the powered shield by your next 26k. Let me try and proc a Power of the Dark Side here so you can see. The Power of the Dark Side is really good. I did that penance without Schism because I'm kind of bad. Power the Dark Side doesn't always proc here, but we'll just do it without it, I guess. So Schism to Schism to Shadow Pain there, and then Smite Mind Blast, Smite Powered Solace, and then you get the penance into this damage window right here, and I think that might have been a Power of the Dark Side, but this shield's going to be increased by 60k. So getting those big penances out is insanely effective with Force-Out. And also, I really like sending Shadow Fiend with PI. So like what I like to do at like the start of solo shuffles when people just kind of send in instantly. So I literally just PI first global, Shadow Cove, Schism into Pain, into Mind Blast into Smite, into Mind Blast into Solace, and I should have honestly Shadow Fiended already, but then we just already have the big penance and you get to send that into the thing and boom, you're just doing the most damage here. Very nice, very nice. Alright, so mana efficiency. Mana efficiency on disc is actually like really weird. You don't really have too much you can do. You want to try not to Radiance unless you have to, but Radiance is very expensive. It's actually not crazy expensive, but it's pretty expensive. Mass Dispel is really expensive. So you don't want to be all willy-nilly on Mass Dispel, like, oh, there's 3 people behind the pillar all grouped up, I'm just going to press Mass Dispel and purge a buff from each of them. That is obviously, excuse me, that is obviously very expensive. But the way you're getting mana back on disc is you do want to Shadow Fiend with your Power Infusion, at least the first one, because your Shadow Fiend will attack faster, each attack generates more mana, and then you want to Solace on cooldown. The Solace on cooldown gives you 1% of your mana. That's obviously really good. And then if you're still having issues with mana, you can, if you're playing the Inner Light, Inner Shadow. If you're playing Inner Light, Inner Shadow, and you're starting to you could switch to the Inner Light version, and that also reduces the cooldown of your mana spells by 15% to try and keep you in the game a little bit. See, there's really not much you can do. Just make sure you're using Shadow Fiend, make sure you're using Solace, and, you know, try and avoid Mass Dispelling unless you have to. You know, a lot of people are like, bro, you don't use Radiance, you don't use Radiance. And sometimes they're right. Sometimes I kind of forget I have it, but I don't think that you should just be pressing Radiance, like, at least not in, like, regular 3, just because it's off cooldown. You know what I mean? Think about it. Like, do I need a Radiance here? You should be pressing it when you need the healing, not because you just are pressing it like whack-a-mole. But in solo shuffle, it's probably a lot easier to press because the games are fast-paced and you want to keep Atonement on everyone and you just want to keep the ball rolling. So yeah, positioning on Priest, generally speaking, I feel like I'm always pretty far back, either PvE healing with my healing build or just doing max damage, but I definitely think there is a lot of value in being able to get fears. So it's just kind of one of those things you just have to feel out. You know, I can't tell you should be going for fears. It really depends on the situation. Are you putting yourself in a position where you can get the fear? Are you going to get crowd controlled? Is the fear obtainable? You know, do you have cooldowns to recover and healing spells to keep yourself alive if you are putting yourself in that awkward position? There's a lot of what ifs. So it really depends. But yeah, try and avoid CC on disc. Honestly, CC is what loses you games on disc. I feel like when I'm not CC'd and not interrupted, I keep people alive so well. I feel like I lose, especially in solo shuffle lobbies, because I'm getting polymorphed, or I'm getting trapped, or I'm getting root beamed, or I'm getting cycloned, things like that. I feel like when I'm not CC'd, when I'm playing my healing build, I actually have a ton of healing. It feels like it's really hard for me to lose, but so I feel like I generally don't go in for fears, but I do think those fears are really good to get. So it's one of those things that you just got to play out and feel. Your utility comes probably from Purge, Mass Spell, Power Infusion, and just the fact that you can do a ton of damage, especially if you're playing the damage build. I talk about how I play the healing build a lot, but I actually still do pretty good damage. It's actually really ironic. I feel like when I play against some of the priests in other lobbies that are playing Expiation, I out-damage them just based on the simple fact that I'm doing more healing. My team is more stable, so I'm able to send out more Mind Blasts and Smites, even though they're not doing as much damage as his Mind Blasts with the increased damage and the Expiation. But I get to use more offensive globals because we're more stable. You should always try and be offensive on Priest. Like, whenever you can. I don't want to say offense should be your #1 priority on disc because, you know, I play a healing build, but whenever you can, you want to be looking for the opportunity to do damage or purge or fear. You are just an offensive healer, and that's the way the game is being played. So even if you're playing the healing build, you want to get those Mind Blasts rolling on cooldown. You want to have the Shadow Pain up. You want to be going for the Solaces. If you have free globals and there's important buffs out, you want to press the Purge button, and you're always pedal to the metal in Disc Priest. You should be using every single global. You should never be sitting around doing nothing. Dealing with kicks on disc is it's a little unfortunate now because, you know, we did lose Shadow Men, and I talked about this a little bit earlier. basically Mind Blast on CD. This is something I didn't talk about that I just want to touch on real quick, because this is a common question I get, and I kind of skipped over it. A lot of people ask me, why don't I play mind games? I should have touched on this in the talents. I don't play mind games because I don't think it's good. I don't think mind games is good. I think that the global oppressing mind games is worse than the global oppressing Mind Blast. Mind Blast gives you 1 proc of Harsh Disciplines. If you're playing Expiation, the Mind Blast does more damage. And the only time I think Mind Games is good is when Shadow Priests play it and they're all the way down into Shadow Perceptions, which makes it last longer, deal more damage, and deal more healing. This is literally a 50% buff to Mind Games. And without that, I don't even dispel it. I can literally just heal through it. It just doesn't feel good. It feels like pressing the Mind Blast has more interaction with how your utility works. So could you get a big Mind Games off? It's possible. I mean, you could play, the Schism into the Shadow Cove, and then you could get, the 15% from the Twilight Equilibrium, and if you're going Twilight Corruption. I'm not going to tell you not to play Mind Games. I personally just don't think it's good. I really don't think it's crazy. But I know some display it, and I'm not going to say they're wrong. But if you play it and you kind of have the same feeling as me, you could try dropping it. And if you don't play it and you feel like I'm wrong, try picking it up. So yeah. But yeah, dealing with kicks, this is obviously faking is one way to deal with it. But like I said earlier, Mind Blast on CD. People will kick Mind Blast because it is important to kick on disc. But like I said earlier, one of the bigger things you could do is Shadow Covenant and turn your Holy Penance into a Shadow Penance, and you can deal with kicks that way. So if you get kicked on that one, you have the Powered Shield, you have the Flash Heals, you have the Palm, Renew, Solaces, and then with the increased duration of Shadow Covenant, you can actually get a second Dark Reprimand out in that Shadow Covenant. So that is another way to deal with kicks. And in terms of when to be offensive and defensive, I think this is the biggest... This is the biggest balance of Disc Priest right now we've ever seen. It kind of reminds me of like Druid. I feel like Druid is one of those classes that I always struggled on. Should I be going for the clones? Should I be keeping hots up? Do I have a good balance of hots to go for the clones? And this is just, this is a game of tug of war with Disc Priest. Should I be doing damage? Should I be healing? Am I healing too much? Did we not win because I wasn't dealing enough damage? Was I trying to deal too much damage and my team fell behind? It's an impossible question to answer. Like, it's just... Every global you press on disc feels very impactful, which means the class is very fun. But you really just kind of have to play it out, feel games out, try and get an idea of when you should be doing damage and when you shouldn't be doing damage. And I think it's also very comp specific. And I didn't talk about this earlier, like offensive build versus defensive build versus shuffle. I would say, like I said, I'm currently always playing this healing build, but I do think that this is a more standard build. And when should you play, the healing build versus the defensive build? Or sorry, versus the damage build? In Shuffle, it's hard to say, but I do feel like sometimes you hit like a wall with Shuffle where you could literally just not do any damage. And I don't exactly know what comps and what classes are the ones that don't allow me to deal damage. I also think it's also kind of player specific. Some people just run into the middle of the map and just eat Mind Blast like it's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And some people just play super turtly on the pillar and they'll never leave and they just want to avoid your damage. So it's really hard for me to like figure out exactly what it is that allows me to deal damage with this priest. So that's kind of why I'm always playing the healing build. But I think in threes, the expiation build is a lot more common. When I'm playing like melee cleaves, I feel like the expiation build doesn't feel as good because I can get trained and I get spam kicked. And even though the shadow tree is the tree that you're okay with getting kicked on, when you're spam getting kicked on shadow and you're playing expiation, you literally just have a dead talent. So it feels a little bit awkward. And then, so basically what I'm saying is like, if you're playing like a cleave and you're taking all the CC and all the interrupts, you could go ahead and try the healing build if you feel like you can't get the damage out. But I do think that if you're playing a comp where you kind of rely on the disc damage and you have another caster on your team, perhaps a warlock, perhaps a mage, perhaps an LE shaman, someone that's eating those interrupts for you, then the expiation build should become more valuable because basically your DPS is kind of like soaking those kicks and soaking that damage to where you want to be able to kind of pick up the slack a little bit. So it really just depends. The best way I can explain it is trial and error. If you lose a game and you're playing damage spec and you feel like you can't do enough damage, just know that there's another option out there, basically, because I feel like this is an option that maybe a lot of people don't think of or haven't heard of. One thing I haven't really talked about is contrition in this build. Contrition, it might look really bad on paper, but basically, it's like a 15% buff to your penance, right? So 10% would be an extra 1,500. So maybe it's not exactly 15%, I'm not sure. But, you know, when you heal for 15k, just pretend you healed for 70k, 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 70k. It just makes your penance just a little bit stronger, which is pretty nice. And then, yeah, in terms of comps, I don't think Disc Priest is going to be overall the best healer in every single comp. And as a matter of fact, I think you, in most situations, besides, I guess, like jungle and stuff, you'd probably prefer to have some sort of caster with you. I don't know why Disc has always been traditionally very good with jungle. I think it's because it could just kind of get the fears off the traps, do damage between, and also spam those damage reduction cooldowns to keep your team offensive between. But, yeah, I think you know, obviously Rogue Mage is good. Rogue Mage Priest. I feel like even Rogue Lock Priest feels pretty scary. Jungle's obviously really good right now. I feel like that's one of the better ones. And I want to continue trying melee cleaves with Disc Priest. Like, I want to try some DHDK. Windwalker DK didn't feel very great, though, I will say. But yeah, it's just, it's tough. It's tough to say. I would say Jungle, Rogue, Mage, and Rogue Lock feel the best right now. Obviously, those are the meta comps, so maybe not really too surprising there. Kitty Cleave actually could be pretty good with a disc. I think that's actually one that sounds pretty scary. So yeah, I think there's some options out there with melee cleaves with Disc Priest that could be pretty good. But you might have to end up playing that healing build I was talking about earlier. And one last thing that I want to say before I head off here is, we didn't talk about this, is CD rotation. Generally speaking, I throw out Barrier and Rapture very, very early. And I try and use like pain suppressions in between the Barrier and Rapture cooldown, and then Life Swap as a last resort global. I would say generally speaking, 9 out of 10 games, that's always how it feels. Barrier goes down first, Rapture, you know, probably same time or shortly follows. Pain suppression to reduce damage like in between those moments, especially if, you know, you're in a stun or your teammate's in a stun. And then Void Shift is generally that that last ditch effort to kind of keep your team in the fight. So I think that kind of sums it up for Disc Priest. I'm probably going to queue some threes right now or lose some more shuffle rating. I'm down 200 points in 4 lobbies. Pog champs in the chat. But yeah, I hope this was able to give you some sort of insight or some sort of information on Disc Priest. Like I said earlier, I'm not the best Disc Priest. I'm obviously still learning, but I did want to throw out some information there in case I could help you guys, you know, either learn something or, you know, get a little bit better in the meantime. But yeah, thank you guys very much for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed.
Promise that you never be lonely. Be the fan that's